Hi, I'm Bridie Shepherd. You're watching The Eco Show, and right now I'm hanging out with a kangaroo. But this episode is actually going to be about another iconic species, the Tassie Devil. They're facing a species-threatening disease, but I'll be meeting the people who are working to save them. What do you think? What do you think?
Tasmanian Devils are one of Australia's most unique animals, known for their piercing growl and aggressive bite. They once lived on the mainland, but now are only found in the Tassie bush, and even this is becoming increasingly rare. Tassie Devils are highly at risk of catching the devil facial tumour disease. It's extremely infectious, fast-acting, and fatal. Experts at the University of Tasmania are working on a vaccine to save the species. But before I learn about that, I really wanted to hear more about this misunderstood marsupial.
I go as far as saying that they're the most misunderstood animal potentially on the planet. You know, we hear the name devil. Their name comes from the sound they make. The first Europeans that arrived to Australia or Tasmania heard them screaming at the top of their lungs, and in their writings they wrote Tasmania was haunted with demons, devils and banshees. Then they see them eating carcasses, they hear about the jaw strength, and suddenly there's this picture of this barbaric animal that's killing anything in its path and leaving no trace when it's done. And then you throw in a crazy cartoon character named Taz as well, and it's quite a good blend. So look, it just leads them to being so misunderstood, and I think one positive has been that people have heard about them.
That's Greg from Bonorong Wildlife Sanctuary. The sanctuary, located just outside of Hobart, is a rescue service and wildlife hospital for all animals. But I have a feeling Greg has a soft spot for the Tassie Devil.
Every sort of really healthy ecosystem has a scavenger somewhere in there. If we look at a hyena in Africa, the devil is sort of Australia's hyena, I guess, but the jaw strength is estimated to be a tonne of pressure, just short of a tonne of pressure, or per cubic inch. So you're talking incredible power.
And their jaws are probably what?
Yeah, look, they open quite wide, so the pressure point's right here at the back. So you'll see their fingers are very dexterous, and they'll hold their food and really angle the bones. So sort of almost like they're playing a flute at times, so they can get it to the back.
Kind of like a dog gnawing on a bone?
Yeah, that's right. And the rule being that generally, if they can get their mouth around the bone, with a bit of work, they can chomp through and swallow it. So, you know, fully grown wombats, they can eat every last bit except for the very top of the skull. Wallabies, it's incredible power, but you're not going to start by eating the bones. You know, eating those bits are when there's nothing else there. So if they come across a fresh carcass, the good bits are the inside bits. So they are described as sort of eating something from the inside out, I guess. But if you haven't eaten for 4 or 5 days, you know, hopefully you had a big gorge. They can eat 40% of their body weight in a sitting, but then it might be, say, 4 or 5 days before you find something, you know, then you are going to eat whatever you find, and you're going to make the very, very most of it. But I think what's incredible with that is their endurance. You know, you've got this animal that when it moves, it looks really awkward. It almost looks like they have a leg injury, and you think, gee, that's not an efficient way to go. But they've been recorded travelling over 50 kilometres in a night, just lolloping along. As if they're hungry, you run until you find food.
And they're not hunting per se, they're scavenging.
Not hunters. Look, there's a lot of people will describe them as a hunter because they will try and hunt every single night. But if we look at, I guess, their skills, the average top speed of an adult devil is 14 kilometres an hour. So that's, I'm told, about the same as a chicken. So they're not getting anywhere particularly quickly. Then their eyesight's really poor. So, you know, most predators can spot things a long way away and then plan a stealthy attack. And then the stealthy attack bit is not an option for these guys, you know. So if we look at how they've evolved alongside Tassie tigers and quolls and eagles, kites, falcons, all of these incredible hunters, their job is the vacuum cleaner. It's to clean up everything that's left behind. So that's where they've really honed their skills over. They've even evolved smaller brains to make more room for their jaws. You know, priorities. That's always priorities.
Scavenger animals search for carcasses to feast on, and Tassie Devils are often hit by cars when running onto highways to find roadkill. They are also prone to dog attacks, getting caught in fences, and secondary poisoning. But by far the facial tumour disease is their biggest threat. The devil facial tumour disease is a transmissible cancer, which is highly unusual as there are only a handful of transmissible cancers known in the natural world. Usually, infectious diseases involve a pathogen, like a virus or a bacteria, but in this case it's a cancer cell on its own which is passed from one individual to the next. This, coupled with the unique devil mating style, is a recipe for disaster. Tassie devils will bite each other on the mouth and face while mating, at which point the disease will spread. Ruth from the University of Tasmania is a research vet. She's going to tell me more about this devastating disease.
Devil facial tumour disease, or DFTD for short, was first observed in 2006, but genetics have suggested that it's been around probably 10 years prior to that. That was at a time when sort of recent modelling has shown that there were 53,000 devils approximately in the wild. Fast forward to 2020 and that population has declined to about 17,000, and that's almost exclusively due to devil facial tumour disease.
So what happens when they contract this disease? What are the symptoms? What happens?
It's a malignant cancer, so most devils will die within 6 to 12 months of that tumour first appearing. And death is a consequence either of starvation, depending on the location of the tumour, so if it's inside the mouth, or it's a consequence of metastases and subsequent organ failure.
And do the tumours actually erode the bones of the devils?
Yeah, so it's called devil facial tumour disease because most of the cancers will appear either on the face or in the mouth or that head or neck region. And depending on the location, yes, it can erode the bone, the teeth. We've seen them in the skull. There have been brain metastases, although they're not as common as other regions where the cancer will metastasise to. But yeah, it is a really aggressive cancer.
Greg and his team at Bonorong will see firsthand how devastating this disease is.
To think that a tumour can be passed from one animal to another, I mean, I think all of us in our lives somewhere have known someone affected by tumours, but to think of that being contagious and just spread through their everyday activity. We hear about it being called facial tumour disease and the tumours on the face, but in reality they're actually all over the body. So we see many that are just absolutely littered with this disease, but it's just such a horrific way to go, and I think it's hard for us because it's become a little bit old news. But we still see, one at least every couple of weeks at the moment anyway, coming in where, to be really frank, its head just looks like it's exploding from the inside out. I'm sorry to paint such a graphic picture, but you don't get used to seeing that. It is heartbreaking every single time to think what that animal's going through. And if people saw what we did when those animals come in, I think facial tumour disease would be right on the forefront of their mind. Like we have to do something for this animal, if not to save the species, for the individual suffering as they do. It presents so differently with all of them, except the one thing you can almost guarantee is tumours on the face affecting their ability to eat. And imagine that period where it's a real struggle to eat, but they're desperate to eat, and what that would be like. It's heart-wrenching, it really is. And then they might have young in the pouch that are then slowly starving as well because the mum can't produce what they need.
Can you tell me a bit about the progression of the disease?
Look, it's very fast, and I think that's one of the most scary parts of it. Is certainly some of the early research that we read showed that really none of them were living even 6 months. I think was the longest one was recorded. So that's very, very fast for something to just take over. So when we get a call for one, the first thing we do is we get photos sent, because if it's really early stages of the disease, even though you know what that animal is going to go through, it might be a female with young somewhere that have a chance of surviving, so that one has to be left out there to do its thing. And of course we know some have fought the disease off naturally in the wild at this stage, and for that to sort of develop, you do need the disease out there. So what we're analysing is suffering, not potential future suffering, which is a really hard thing to do in the field that we're in. But of course so many of them that we get photos of where people could just walk up to them and literally pick them up because they are just kaput. That is a case of just easing their suffering as quickly as we possibly can. Just hopefully something can be found with a tumour, or samples can be taken that at least aid their brothers and sisters and others of their own kind to survive. So it's trying to make the most of just a really awful situation, really.
Greg and I have been sitting on the side of a devil enclosure, and it's about time I meet the lucky devil living inside. Her name is Kelly, and I am in love.
Look, I mentioned that devils are really misunderstood. They all have incredibly different personalities, and I think that's something really important to remember. Wildlife, often we just tar them with the same brush. We see dogs, we see cats, we see humans, and we go, oh, this one's cheeky, this one's shy, this one's this. Wildlife is exactly the same, it's just more subtle. So let's talk about Callie. She is naughty, she is hyperactive, and she just never ever stops. She's a full-on little devil, this one, but...
Oh, hi, Kelly. Yes.
There we are.
Hi, beautiful girl.
So this is what they do with their mum, you see, is they bite onto the skin and they sort of hang on for a stage. So we think that's what they're replicating when they do sort of this biting.
So you're essentially Kelly's mum, aren't you?
Yeah, ugliest mum in the world. You know, we all draw a short straw every now and then. So her mum actually died of facial tumour disease, very sadly, and there were 4 of them in the pouch, so a full load, but they were absolutely emaciated. They just didn't get what they needed from mum. So one unfortunately couldn't be saved. It was just the little runt was just far too emaciated. But amazingly, this one and her 2 brothers survived. And to give you an idea, I had some little orphan pinky devils, so ones that were so small they didn't have fur yet that we were raising. They weighed 100 grams. This little lady here was fully furred and weighed only 120 grams. So she was very, very underweight. So look, she's done really, really well to survive, and normally we wouldn't raise them like this. They're raised for release, but we're hoping to use her for a bit of a study into the composition of their milk so we can try and develop a devil-specific formula to hand raise orphan ones in the future. But yeah, very misunderstood, aren't they? You just wouldn't expect to see this ferocious animal just having a cuddle.
She's adorable. She seems very, very calm, very, very comfortable around you.
Look, she's, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, she's having a good day. I reckon she's probably in her entire life only sat this calmly 4 or 5 times. So there you go, calming effect you have on Tassie Devils, the devil whisperer we'll call you.
The devil whisperer, what an honour. Another person with an affinity for the devil is Andy, an immunologist at the Menzies Institute for Medical Research, who is currently developing a vaccine to fight these devastating tumours.
The Tasmanian Devil facial tumor disease is caused by transmissible cancers, so they're different than the cancers in people. Like if you got cancer or I got cancer, it would stay in you or me. But in the devils, one devil originally got a cancer and ended up on a second devil and then a third devil and a fourth. So the cancers are actually jumping among devils. So we're trying to make a vaccine that blocks that transmission so the devil cancer doesn't keep going and killing more and more devils.
So a really unique sort of disease to be studying.
Yeah, it's very unique. There's only one other known transmissible cancer in mammals in the world. It's in dogs, and this is a sexually transmitted cancer that's been going about 8,000 years. So fortunately, that one's not, depressing the dog population, and it's not as bad as the devil ones, but devils now have 2 different transmissible cancers, so they have 2 of the 3 of these awful pathogens in the world.
Vaccine research began about 15 years ago, led by Professor Greg Woods. In its early stages, the vaccines were administered by injection.
So one of the drawbacks of that earlier vaccine was that you had to trap every devil and then inject them with the vaccine. And looking around at Tasmania's beautiful landscape, there's no chance of catching every devil and giving them a jab and possibly multiple jabs. So what we're working on is making a vaccine that can go into a bait. So you can put the bait in the environment, the devil eats it, and then they get vaccinated that way.
While bait-based oral vaccines have been used on wildlife for about 50 years, the tricky part for this one is stopping other animals from eating up all the bait. Andy and his team have been testing an automatic bait dispenser modelled on a version for raccoons used in the United States. Surprisingly, devils are very dexterous. They can reach into the dispenser and pull the bait out, unlike many other animals in Tasmania's bushland.
We're working on 2 different fronts here, trying to develop the bait as a delivery system and also trying to develop the vaccine. So our vaccine is very much like the AstraZeneca vaccine for COVID-19, where you take an attenuated virus, so it's a weak virus that can't make copies of itself, and you put something else into it. So for COVID-19, they put the spike protein from the coronavirus into the vaccine. In our case, we're taking proteins from the devil facial tumors and putting that into the weakened virus. So the idea then is that the devils get exposed to the virus, their immune system comes and kills this weakened virus, and in the process they say, what are those other proteins there? And it turns out they're devil facial tumor proteins, so they build memory to it. So when they get exposed to the tumor later, the immune system recognizes it and kills it before it takes hold.
Where are you at in the vaccine development stage?
So we started this ambitious plan in 2019 to make this oral bait vaccine. So we started working on what would go into the vaccine in the first case and what type of viral vector we would use. So that's the thing that stimulates the immune system to come and have a look. So in those 3 or 4 years, we've now tested a human adenovirus in devil facial tumor cells in the lab, and we know that the weakened human adenovirus can infect the devil facial tumor cells, and it can express the cargo that we put into it. That's sort of thing that actually makes it a devil facial tumor vaccine versus a COVID vaccine. So really good to know that that part can work. We've started working on the bait aspect of it just last year, and we've had a good trial and a recent publication showing that devils will eat the baits, but unfortunately a lot of other animals eat the baits too. So we'll be working on refining the baits in the coming years, and we're looking to start our first vaccine trials in live devils about mid-2023.
What are some of the challenges that are facing you in developing this vaccine?
Yeah, so I started my career working in a human cancer lab, and it was a well-funded lab, and you have all the immunology tools you could ask for, fancy machines and antibodies to tell you this or that, and when you come to an endangered species and nobody's studied their immune system before, you just don't have the tools to start to jump into those complex immune tests. So we had to start making our own tools. So the first few years that I was on this project, I spent trying to make tools for studying the devil's immune system. And necessity is the mother of innovation. So we've come up with some pretty original ideas, of one of them fusing a fluorescent protein to a devil immune protein, so we can track where that immune protein is going in a devil cell or in a tumor cell, and using those same fluorescent proteins to try to tell us where the tumor cells are. So we're doing some pretty innovative things, and the vaccine design that we've come up with here is nobody's made one like it before, because nobody's tried to get rid of a transmissible cancer before. So it's some pretty new ideas, and they're big challenges because people haven't done it before, but it also gives us the opportunity to try some pretty creative things. And some of our collaborators in the States have picked up on our vaccine design and are going to try it for human cancer. So there's definitely feedback, and we would love to have our vaccine design for devils. Hopefully it works for devils, but also be translated into something useful for human medicine.
Whilst filming the Eco Show in Hobart, our crew chose to stay at the Islington Hotel, slightly removed from the city with panoramic views of Mount Wellington. The private yet proximal Islington Hotel offers guests a privileged location, showcasing the best of what Tasmanian accommodation has to offer. The Islington Hotel presents a sensory experience with 11 unique rooms richly characterised by their eclectic style and exceptional features. This luxury adults-only Hobart hotel is for those seeking a gracious retreat amid an elegant setting. To book your stay at the Islington Hotel, visit islingtonhotel.com.
It's time to take a closer look at some of these tumour cells.
So this screen is showing how we go about making a vaccine, and in this case we're using an adenovirus to make the vaccine. So we have a helper cell line here that supplies the missing part of the virus, and then we put the rest of the genome for the virus into these cells, and then the virus starts turning on proteins, and most of them, there's going to be no virus there initially. It needs a bunch of pieces of Lego to come together in the exact right configuration for it to start working. But once that happens, then viruses do what viruses do best, and they start making copies of themselves, and they go out and infect new cells. So in this one, whenever we get a virus into a cell, it turns the cell green. So you can see here that there's a virus in pretty much every cell in this image. And something that I like to see that, maybe it's not of interest to a lot of people, but if there's a dark spot in it, that's usually the nucleus, and I don't want this green protein to be in the nucleus. I'm trying to target to the membrane of the cell. So seeing all these darker areas within a lot of the cells is a good sign. A specific part of this vaccine that we're designing is we're trying to put the target proteins on the surface of the cells that the vaccine gets into. So that gives the immune system more ways to see it. So normally a virus would hide out inside of a cell, and the immune system might not know it's there, but we're trying to send a flag up to the top of the cell to say, hey, come look over here, immune system, and see what's inside. And that's one of the ways that the devil facial tumor cells hide from the immune system, is they put down all the flags that the immune system likes to inspect, and then the immune system just zips right by them. So we're trying to send this one up to the surface so the immune system can catch it and say, show me your ID, what are you doing here, are you causing trouble? And then if they are, they hopefully try to kill the tumor cells.
Yeah, so far more visible to the immune system, so it's easier to sort of identify and therefore combat.
Yep, exactly, increased visibility to the immune system.
It's great to know a vaccine and an administering system are well underway because at this stage, if we don't protect the species, it will start to take a toll on the Tasmanian ecosystem as a whole.
Its population is currently estimated at about 17,000. The modelling looks like the population will continue to decline and then sort of plateau off at around 11,000, 12,000 devils. So it suggests that it won't go, that the devils won't go extinct. But at that density, the devils are unlikely to be functional, be able to carry out their functional role in the environment. So, there's this term functionally extinct. And there are certainly parts of Tassie where the devil populations are so low that, they can be referred to as functionally extinct and unable to carry out that ecological role. Without that role, carcasses and so on build up and potentially contaminate the local environment. They also, sort of maintain this balance with prey species and with other smaller carnivores like quolls. And so when there are fewer devils in the environment, then you get an upset balance of, all these other species.
So it's a really delicate system.
Yeah, that's right. And, if, once again, going back to a vaccine or whatever can prevent the devils from, continuing to decline in numbers, you're not only saving that species, you're looking after the whole of the Tasmanian environment.
Into the future, this rescue effort is necessary to restore Tasmania's devil population numbers and support the surrounding ecosystem. While disease-free populations are being bred in captivity for release into the wild, a successful vaccination and disease prevention program will go a long way to help conserve the species. I'm Bridie Shepherd. Thanks for watching this season of The Eco Show.